Ethan Carter had everything a man could dream of. He was only 32 years old and already the CEO of one of the fastest-growing technology companies in New York. Luxury cars, a penthouse apartment, expensive suits, and endless business meetings filled his life. But behind the perfect image, his company was collapsing. A powerful investor gave Ethan one impossible condition. If you want my $50 million, you must prove you're stable. A married CEO earns public trust. It sounded ridiculous. Marriage had nothing to do with business. But losing the investment meant losing everything. For weeks, Ethan searched for someone willing to marry him for 1 year under a legal contract. Everyone refused. One rainy evening, while walking through Manhattan, Ethan entered a small cafe. There, he noticed a young waitress quietly helping an elderly customer who couldn't even afford his dinner. Instead of calling the manager, she smiled and paid the bill with her own money. Her kindness surprised him. Her name tag read, Emma. She wasn't dressed like someone special. No expensive jewelry. No designer clothes. Just kind eyes and a gentle smile. The next day, Ethan returned. He offered her something unbelievable. Marry me for 1 year. I'll pay you $1 million. Emma stared at him in complete silence. You don't even know me, she finally whispered. I don't need love, Ethan replied. I only need a wife. She looked into his eyes for a long moment. Then she asked one strange question. If I say yes, will you promise never to ask about my past? Ethan didn't understand why she asked that. But he didn't care. I promise. She slowly nodded. I accept. Neither of them realized. That single decision would completely change both of their lives. The wedding happened just 7 days later. There were no family members. No close friends. Only lawyers, photographers, and business partners. To the world, Ethan and Emma looked like the perfect couple. Inside, they were complete strangers. After the ceremony, Ethan handed Emma a thick envelope. $1 million, he said. Half now. The rest after 1 year. Emma didn't even open it. I don't need your money today, she replied calmly. That surprised Ethan. Every person he had met cared about money. Emma didn't. The next morning, Ethan left early for work. Before leaving, he noticed Emma standing in the kitchen. You don't have to cook, he said. We can hire chefs. Emma smiled softly. Sometimes a homemade breakfast says more than expensive gifts. Ethan ignored her words and walked away. Days turned into weeks. Although their marriage was fake, Emma quietly changed the atmosphere of the house. She learned the names of every security guard. She thanked the cleaners every morning. She even remembered the driver's birthday and surprised him with a small cake. Everyone in the mansion admired her kindness. Everyone. Except Ethan. He still believed emotions were a weakness. One evening, Ethan returned home after losing another major business deal. He was furious. Without saying a word, he threw his briefcase onto the floor. I've had enough, he shouted. Emma calmly picked up the scattered papers. Instead of arguing, she handed him a warm cup of coffee. You don't have to fight every battle alone, she said. For the first time in years, someone spoke to him with genuine care. Ethan looked at her, but before he could reply, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a single name. Daniel Brooks. The man responsible for destroying Ethan's company. And what Daniel said next made Ethan's blood run cold. I know who your wife really is. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. What do you mean? He asked. Daniel laughed. You think Emma is just a poor waitress? You've been lied to. Before Ethan could ask another question, the call ended. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He remembered Emma's strange condition before their marriage. Promise me you'll never ask about my past. At the time, it had seemed harmless. Now it sounded like a warning. The next morning, Ethan secretly asked his private investigator to look into Emma's background. 3 days later, the investigator walked into Ethan's office with an empty file. I'm sorry, sir. I've never seen anything like this. There are almost no records of her life before 5 years ago. No school history. No medical records. No family information. It was as if she appeared out of nowhere. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt afraid. Who was the woman living in his house? That evening, he returned home earlier than usual. Emma was sitting alone in the garden, watching the sunset. She smiled as he walked toward her. You look tired. Ethan forced a smile. I had a long day. He wanted to ask her the truth, but he remembered his promise. Instead, he sat beside her in silence. After a few minutes, Emma quietly said, Some secrets don't exist to hurt people. They exist to protect them. Ethan looked at her in surprise. Before he could respond, a black luxury car stopped outside the mansion. 3 men stepped out. One of them walked straight toward Emma. Then he respectfully bowed his head and said, "Miss, your father is waiting for you." Ethan froze. Father? Who exactly was Emma? Ethan stood frozen as the man respectfully bowed before Emma. "Miss, your father is waiting for you." Emma slowly closed her eyes. "I was hoping this day wouldn't come," she whispered. She looked at Ethan with sadness. "I'm sorry, but I have to leave for a few hours." Before Ethan could ask anything, she got into the black limousine and disappeared into the night. His mind was filled with questions. Who was Emma? The next morning, Ethan couldn't focus on work. Late that afternoon, his private investigator called. "Sir, I found something." "What is it?" "The license plate of a limousine belongs to the Harrison Group." Ethan's eyes widened. The Harrison Group wasn't just another company. It was one of the richest and most powerful business empires in America. Its owner, Richard Harrison, was a billionaire known for avoiding the public. But he had only one child, a daughter. Ethan immediately searched for old newspaper articles. Years ago, there had been rumors that Richard Harrison's daughter had disappeared after a family tragedy. No one had seen her since. No photographs. No interviews. Nothing. His hands started shaking. Could Emma really be? Before he could finish the thought, the front door opened. Emma quietly walked inside. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. Without saying a word, she placed a small wooden box on the table. "This belongs to you now," she said softly. Ethan opened the box. Inside was an old pocket watch and a faded photograph. In the picture, a much younger Richard Harrison was standing beside Ethan's late father. The 2 men were smiling like brothers. On the back of the photo, someone had written 5 words. "One day, tell him the truth." Ethan slowly looked up at Emma. His voice trembled. "What truth?" Emma took a deep breath before speaking. "My father and your father built their first company together," she said quietly. "They weren't just business partners. They were brothers in everything except blood." Ethan stared at the old photograph. "My father never told me that." Emma nodded. "Because someone made sure the truth stayed buried." She slowly sat down. 20 years ago, my father trusted the wrong man. His name was Victor Kane, the same man who now controls Daniel Brooks from the shadows. Ethan's face turned pale. Victor Kane. The businessman everyone feared, but no one could ever prove guilty. Emma continued. Victor wanted the company for himself. He spread lies, forged documents, and turned friends into enemies. My father disappeared from public life. Your father died, believing he had been betrayed. Tears filled Emma's eyes. They were both victims. Silence filled the room. Everything Ethan had believed for years suddenly felt like a lie. Then, "Why did you marry me?" he asked. Emma looked directly into his eyes. "Because I made a promise. When your father saved my father's life years ago, my father swore that one day our family would repay that debt." Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So, this wasn't about money?" Emma gave a faint smile. "I never wanted your money. I wanted to protect the last person my father trusted." At that exact moment, the mansion light suddenly went out. Darkness covered every room. A loud crash echoed from downstairs. Then the security alarm began screaming. Ethan grabbed Emma's hand. Someone had broken into the house. The alarm echoed through the mansion. Red emergency lights flashed across the walls. Ethan pulled Emma behind him. "Stay close to me," he whispered. Heavy footsteps came from the first floor. One, then another. The head of security ran into the hallway. "Sir." 3 armed men entered through the back gate. Before Ethan could react, a gunshot shattered the silence. Glass exploded across the living room. The attackers weren't there to steal money. They were looking for Emma. One of the masked men shouted, "Take the girl alive." Ethan's heart pounded. Without thinking, he grabbed Emma's hand and rushed toward a hidden exit that led to the underground parking garage. Behind them, the security team fought to stop the intruders. As they reached Ethan's car, Emma suddenly froze. "We can't leave yet." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "They're trying to kill us." Emma pointed toward a painting hanging on the garage wall. "Behind that painting is a safe. My father hid something there years ago. It's the only evidence that can destroy Victor Kane forever." Ethan quickly moved the painting aside. A small steel safe appeared. Emma entered a 6-digit code. The door clicked open. Inside was a black flash drive and a handwritten letter. Emma carefully picked them up. Before they could escape, a slow clap echoed through the garage. They turned around. Victor Kane stepped out of the shadows with 2 bodyguards. He smiled coldly. "I've been waiting for this moment for 20 years. Then he raised a pistol and aimed it directly at Ethan. Victor Kane smiled as he pointed the gun at Ethan. "You should have stayed out of this," he said coldly. Emma stepped forward without fear. "Leave him alone, Victor. This fight is between you and me." Victor laughed. "Your father thought the same thing 20 years ago." He held out his hand. "Give me the flash drive." Emma tightened her grip. "It contains every crime you've ever committed." Victor's smile disappeared. "Exactly why I can't let you leave." Just then, Ethan noticed something behind Victor. The security guards were quietly moving into position. He needed to buy them a few seconds. "You ruined both our families," Ethan shouted. "But you still lost." Victor turned toward him. "I never lose." In that instant, Emma threw the flash drive across the garage. It slid beneath a parked SUV. Victor's bodyguards rushed after it. The distraction gave the security team the chance they needed. "Move," one guard yelled. The garage exploded into chaos. Bodyguards tackled security officers. Gunshots echoed against the concrete walls. Ethan grabbed Emma's hand and ran toward the exit. They escaped through a narrow service door and reached the street. Police sirens could already be heard in the distance. Emma looked back at the burning garage. "They'll never stop chasing us," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "Then we stop running." Emma looked at him with surprise. "For the first time in my life," Ethan said, "I'm not fighting for my company. I'm fighting for you." Before Emma could answer, her phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. She opened it. Only one sentence appeared on the screen. "Your father has been kidnapped." Emma's hands began to shake. She read the message again. "Your father has been kidnapped." Her face turned pale. "No," she whispered. Ethan took the phone and immediately dialed the number. It was switched off. "This is a trap," he said. Emma nodded. "I know." Just then, another message arrived. "If you want Richard Harrison alive, come alone. Bring the flash drive. No police." Below the message was an address. An abandoned shipyard on the edge of the city. Ethan looked at Emma. "We're not going alone." But Emma slowly shook her head. "If we ignore the message, they'll kill my father." An hour later, they arrived at the shipyard. The place was silent. Old warehouses stood in darkness. The sound of waves echoed through the empty docks. Suddenly, floodlights turned on. Victor Kane stepped out, smiling. Behind him, Richard Harrison was tied to a chair. His face was bruised, but he was alive. "You came," Victor said. Emma held up the flash drive. "Let my father go." Victor laughed. "You still trust my promises?" He snapped his fingers. One of his men aimed a gun at Richard's head. Ethan's heart pounded. "This ends tonight," he said. Victor smiled. "You're right." He reached for the flash drive. But before Emma handed it over, Richard shouted with all his strength. "Emma, don't do it. The flash drive is the only thing that can destroy him." For 1 second, everyone froze. Then a loud gunshot echoed across the shipyard. The gunshot echoed across the shipyard. For a terrifying second, no one moved. Emma screamed, "Dad!" But it wasn't Richard Harrison who had been shot. One of Victor's own bodyguards collapsed to the ground. Police officers suddenly surrounded the warehouse from every direction. "Drop your weapons," a loud voice ordered. Victor's confident smile disappeared. "You called the police?" he shouted. Ethan shook his head. "No." A familiar voice came from behind. "I did." Everyone turned. It was Daniel Brooks. Victor stared at him in disbelief. "You betrayed me?" Daniel slowly stepped forward. "For 20 years, I helped you out of fear. But today, I'm done." He handed a second flash drive to the lead detective. "This contains copies of every illegal transaction, every fake contract, and every payment Victor ordered." Victor's face turned pale. "You fool." In a desperate attempt to escape, Victor grabbed Emma and held a gun against her head. "No one comes closer." Ethan froze. Emma looked into Ethan's eyes. For the first time since they met, she smiled without fear. "It's okay," she whispered. Ethan took one slow step forward. "I won't let you hurt her." Victor tightened his grip. "One more step and she dies." At that exact moment, Richard Harrison broke free from the chair and pushed Victor with all his strength. The gun fired into the air. Emma fell safely to the ground. Victor lost his balance. Before he could run, the police tackled him to the floor. The handcuffs clicked shut. After 20 years, Victor Kane's empire had finally fallen. 3 months later, the city looked completely different. Victor Kane was sentenced to prison after the court uncovered years of fraud, corruption, and blackmail. Every company he secretly controlled was shut down. With Victor gone, Ethan's company finally recovered. The investors who had once doubted him returned, but Ethan was no longer the same man. He had learned that trust was worth far more than money. One quiet afternoon, Ethan walked into the small cafe where he had first met Emma. The old tables were still there. The same gentle music played in the background. Emma smiled as she served coffee to an elderly customer, just as she had on the day they first met. "You came back," she said. Ethan smiled. "I never really left." He placed the fake marriage contract on the table. Without saying a word, he tore it into small pieces. "It was supposed to end today," Emma whispered. "I know," Ethan replied, "but I don't want a contract anymore." He reached into his pocket and took out a small velvet box. This time, there was no business deal, no investors, no conditions, only one question. "Emma Harrison, will you marry me again?" Tears filled Emma's eyes, but this time, for love. She laughed through her tears. "I've been waiting to hear those words." She softly answered, "Yes." The customers inside the cafe began to clap. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds. As they walked out together, Ethan realized something he had spent his whole life chasing. Success wasn't measured by money. It was measured by the people who stayed beside you when everything else fell apart. Sometimes, the greatest love story begins with a fake promise, and ends with the only promise that truly matters. Forever.